billion in debt. So there's all these other things that come up. You can't base a future funding of roads on and transportation on future growth, because that you might need that for somewhere else. You have to identify a revenue source. So it wasn't really sufficiently identified.
So do you support the president's idea of increasing, putting a tax on each barrel of oil to fund roads?
I think there's a lot of different ways. And that's what I was going to say. Is Governor Granholm had a study committee. I was on the side. There was two parts of that study committee, and there was appointments from all over the state of different stakeholders. There's a lot of different ways to generate revenue. You can, there are tax ways of generating revenue. There's also efficiencies of lowering costs. So I think we need a combination of those things. There's not one easy answer. I will tell you that it was clear that the last time the actual gas tank, you were actually paying less at the tank, and because the way gas tax is generated in the state is a flat tax, so it's based on how many gallons you put in your tank, and it was 19 cents. So basically, every day that every time you went to the gas pump, if you have a car that is getting more miles per gallon than was getting 10 years ago, you've actually been paying less over time, significantly. So, and what's happened to the transportation fund is it was constrained by, because of that, because that's the way we're generating almost a third of our revenue. So I know I'm kind of circling around, but because it's pretty complicated, but basically at the end of the day, I voted no because it was not a plan that addressed sufficiently funding the system. It wasn't a fair plan that included making sure that businesses participate in that. They got this huge tax break a couple of years ago, and our citizens are actually paying more and more. So it's out of balance right now.
So you would support,
I definitely support investment in our roads and infrastructure.
So you could support putting tax on each barrel?
Yeah, and businesses, I think in general,
okay.
Big businesses, like I said, are making great profits. There's very large profits right now, and I think those need to be invested. Anything that would benefit, investing in infrastructure would actually benefit our country as a whole. And as I mentioned earlier, it would create jobs. And we have a consumer economy, so the more jobs that we create with better pay, we need to be supporting people to make a wage where they can actually put food on the table for their family and not have to worry about a roof over their head. They really need to make enough money to pay their bills, and so that is really important to me that we have more balance.
I realize we live in a cold climate; it's really hard on roads. So, to be fair,
but that's actually our infrastructure issue is a national issue. Our ports,
probably.
All of our logistic infrastructure, which is ports and trains, everything that moves goods, partly because we're buying so much stuff overseas, it all has to come back into our country. There's a huge cost associated with that I think could be addressed a little bit more fairly. Instead, it's coming to you and I.
So we do have ports here in Michigan that that infrastructure bill would have addressed.
Yeah, that Sioux Locks is a huge problem. That's a we need federal dollars for that. It's a huge problem right now. If that lock broke down, it would have, I don't remember the economic impact on the state and the country, but it's a huge challenge, and we've been asking for support federally for that, to add another lock, basically, so that if you had a problem, basically right now, if you have a problem, it's done. There's no alternative, and there's a lot of iron ore and other materials that come through.
Was any of that addressed on the transportation bill?
No, it's a federal issue.
Okay,
so the transportation bill, you're talking about state, but the federal government also, there's money that comes from the federal government. So when you go to the gas pump, you also pay a federal gas tax, and that comes back to the state. And but that has to be matched with state dollars, and you have to have the money to match that. So that's
it takes up a lot of our state income, so there isn't as much to devote for other things.
Well, actually, the transportation fund is really separately funded through gas tax, registration fees, and then federal dollars that come back.
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, so it actually comes back, and there was some confusion with Proposal 1 because we are one of there aren't many states that have sales tax on gas, but we do. And we can get rid of it, but it's like $1 billion hole in our schools because it goes to schools. That money goes to schools and communities. So that's one of the ways what's been happening in Lansing is kind of a shell game. So, and that's what we did when we raised the transportation. When we did that bill, we said, okay, well, we're going to have $600 million, but that's going to now come from the general fund. that didn't ever, I mean, they've been kind of patching it because, like I said, under previous leadership, and actually Governor Schneider, as soon as he started, knew that transportation infrastructure, he did a study committee too. So there's been multiple studies that say we need to invest more in our infrastructure. And the other port that's really important is outside the city of Detroit. There's that is the #1 trade corridor in North America. Canada to Detroit. Canada's so there's billions of dollars that cross that trade corridor, and so that's also another area that we're working on the bridge, right? And then the tunnel. I mean, there's so many issues because of the tunnel right now, the rail tunnel. Because we're moving so many product from overseas, there's been a lot of work on, like the Panama Canal has been expanded, and some of the ports like Halifax has been expanded, but getting the goods into here, and a lot of that's automotive, right? So getting the goods here is a little bit more difficult, and getting them out. We're also one of the major food producers in the country. So we are having problems right now moving our product in and out because we haven't invested in rail and the other things. So the rail tunnel right now is, the cars are 1-level cars, boxcar, and the technology has gone to 2-level, and they actually are shipping cartons that way now. It's actually really improved our logistics internationally very significantly. But we have not developed the capacity to move those boxcars because our rail tunnel is for a 1-size boxcar. So there's significant things that we could and should be doing to invest here in Southeast Michigan, also for all the trade that comes across the Canadian border, not just the Sioux Lodge. So it's a huge opportunity, economic opportunity. There's a whole logistics study that the state paid for that is, it hasn't come out. I think one of the things, the other thing that another way to help fund is there's an infrastructure bank, and also using public-private partnerships is another way to do investment, working with businesses and helping to fund things through a toll road is kind of, depending on if it's owned privately or publicly, is a kind of, can be a public-private partnership.
So you're for toll roads?
Well, toll roads are, everything's complicated.
Everything's on the table.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's all sorts of tools out there. We need to come together and figure out ways to move the needle. Well, we need to invest in our infrastructure because we all know that, #1, it creates jobs. Those jobs invest in our economy. It's a churn that goes back into investing in our schools, and so that #1, it creates jobs, and #2, the longer you put off fixing things, the more expensive they are. So what we are doing right now is we are leaving this terrible, terrible legacy for our children and our children's children because we have failing infrastructure all over the country. So I would say that we definitely need to be figuring out, come across, like you talked about being in a bipartisan way, coming and figuring out solutions to that. You know, there's a lot of people that are working on that in DC. So I would like to be part of that conversation of figuring out how to do. I don't have the solution because it's not a one person. If I've learned anything being in Lansing, I'm one of 110, and I did a lot of work on transportation infrastructure for 14 years. I was actually in Q to be the head of the organization that does the planning.
Q to B.
The chair of the group that does all the transportation funding and planning for the Detroit area when I was mayor. So I'm very familiar with issues. I actually went to DC many times and advocated to our current congressperson and previous congresspeople for investment in our state in transportation infrastructure. This is not a new situation, it's been ongoing. The thing is we need to address it, we need to be working on it. So it's definitely something that, it's a big problem. It costs people, you know, I think they're saying about $700 on average of these failing roads between maintenance and tires, and I mean there's been different estimates that come out, but the fact of the matter is it costs our consumers money when we don't fix our roads also, for besides just...
How would it cost the police?
Yeah.
Driving on it with, you know, the cars that are rattled to death.
So I mean, you know, the thing about, for me, it makes a lot of sense because infrastructure is a capital improvement. It's not gonna go, it doesn't disappear, it's there permanently. It's gonna last 20, 30 years, you know, maybe longer depending on what you're doing. So I mean, that's a real investment in our future. It's really clear between that investment in our future and investment in education. You know, I think those are two really simple, really obvious things that we could do to really move the needle on what's happening here in our country. So you had some questions about energy?
Yeah, but I want to tie in with her concern about the gap and if the building is at all accurate. And so I'm assuming from what you said that Because I think one of the big global deals that's affecting all of us disproportionately on the core is the climate change thing.
Yes.
The temperatures have continued to rise very erratically, etc. So that's a huge deal in my mind. I don't think the current Congress has got the will, both statewide and nationally, to really move it aggressively enough. But I'm concerned about, between now and November, how do we get people like yourself elected if we've got that kind of support for Walbert from who knows where. You know, he's an involved Tea Party person, etc. So he's an incumbent and all of that. So,
Sure, well-
so I'd like to hear a little bit about a strategy that has a shot
Okay.
for you.
Well, first of all, I have a track record of winning. Never lost a race, as a matter of fact. So we'll just start there. I know how to win. I know how to put the people together to support me and be on a strong team to do the work for a win. And I would also say that's important. But what's more important is I really am a person that believes in working together. Thank you, Don, for saying that. But that's on our literature. When I ran for mayor back in 1998, I had a little 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, trifold, that I went to every door in my community, and I ran against an incumbent mayor. And there was a picture of a family on this, you know, it was a little black and white thing, you know, it's not, this is crazy how where we are today. This is never on my list of things to do, but I feel passionately, I'm really worried about our kids and our future of our country and our world, to some of the points that you brought up. Right on the top was working together. This is like a core value for me that I believe. I was one of 7 people on my city council. I wasn't the mayor that ran the council and the city. I was a partner with my council members, with our community, with the people that were stakeholders, whether or not it was business or nonprofits or schools. I mean, that's just a core value for me. And also, a core value is there are going to be differing points of view. And those are really important because they help us learn, they make us stronger, they help our curiosity, they help us to understand when you have questions like that. Like, it helps us to learn how to be better as a country. I think we're not doing that right now. We're not doing that in Lansing. It's really upsetting. What happened with the public schools, and we weren't even able, and the reason I kind of talked about this is because it's so raw for me, but so this package of bills came out of the House, we have bipartisan support, except for our House Republicans. The House Republicans ran this bill last week. We were there for 15 hours last week. This crappy, this bad bill came out, and everybody else was up in Mackinac at this policy conference, except for the House. So we were up all night. I got home at 6 a.m. I think, or something like that, Friday morning last week. And so then the Senate, and this was bipartisan, the Senate, bipartisan Senate, governor, mayor of Detroit, the Detroit schools, business leaders that have been working on this for 15 months. This was a bipartisan package. House majority said, we don't like it, threw it out the window, put something back at the Senate rolled over and said, okay, and they basically, the only thing that they really changed is there was a part of it that was extremely bad, which is that the charter schools that were failing last week, we didn't have to hold them accountable, the failing charter schools. And now they've kind of made it a little bit more fair, because before, last week was Detroit schools are failing public schools, they need to be closed, but the charters didn't need to be closed. Now they're at least coming a little closer on that, but as far as dealing with an oversight committee as to where these schools can open, I mean, there's all these other complicated factors. This is a 15-month work in progress, different minds. It was just all erased last night. And then the Detroit people weren't even able to stand up while we were voting on it to talk about it. We were made to sit in our chairs, and we had to sit there and vote at midnight on this. And it is so offensive that you can't, in a democratic process, you can't even stand up as the representative of the kids in Detroit schools. So that's one of the reasons that I'm running, because I believe that there is a process, and it should be everybody, whether or not you agree or not disagree. I was like, on my council, there were times where I was the only person that voted a certain way. Everybody voted the other way. Didn't happen that often, but it sure as heck happened, and I'm fine with that. I think we need to have differing points of view. But at the end of the day, we need to address the problems we have in our country. Our kids are living in poverty, 25% of our kids. they're living in semi-trucks, or they're homeless, and they're going to school without food in their stomach and without a roof over their heads. This is America. What the heck? Why are we doing things like that? So I think that I can win because I believe in working across the aisle and solving problems, and I have a track record of doing that. And I've tried to do that in Lansing. It's a very difficult environment for several reasons. One, I beat the incumbent state house representative. It was the top race in the state. It was not supposed to be winnable. It was redistricted after the 2010 census to be a Republican seat. It actually leaned a little bit more Republican than the 7th congressional district. So people say, well, it's not winnable. I've done it before, number one. And number two, I think people are starved for somebody that wants to listen to them, that cares about them, that really believes that we can work together. And that's why I have people that come from both sides of the aisle, some people that haven't decided, some people that are strong supporters of Republicans, but they want to know what we can do together to solve the problems, because we all know we have some really big problems in our country. And specifically for me, it's about our kids, it's about the future of our country, and the environment is a huge part of that. So in the state, we have the same problem in the state as we have right now at the federal level. It's a Republican majority. We can't even do an energy bill.
Yeah, I was in.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
In Senate, 437, 438 this last week.
Yeah.
Just
So you know exactly what's going on.
I do, yeah.
And how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
And the thing that's amazing to me is we know that when we do forward-thinking policy, there's so much innovation that comes out of it. There's new jobs. There's it could be such an exciting opportunity. And I've talked to other states, other people that live in other states about what happens when you have more, higher renewable portfolio standard. It creates innovation and new investment. Those are good things. That's what we want to see here. That's what creates jobs. That's how the internet, all this stuff comes from research and development. That is all innovation and moving our state forward, and our country forward. So it's definitely a seat. It's gone back and forth. It's definitely winnable. It's winnable for somebody that's going to work hard, that wants to represent the people of this district, that listens to what the people's issues are. And what I've been hearing when I talk to people, when I go door to door, is people are worried about their kids. They're worried about how to pay their bills. They're worried about what's happening in their environment. They're worried about clean water and their infrastructure. They're worried because they don't see any real conversation. And my experience, since I've been in public service for 24 years. 20 years I was nonpartisan, and I worked in the city of Saline, but I also worked regionally around the state, and as I mentioned, I did some national work on local government interests. But when I came to Lansing and wanted to work across the aisle, there's been no opportunities to do that. I've introduced many bills. I've had one hearing in a committee meeting, and that was like 2 weeks ago. So there's no interest in, and I came with this expertise in transportation. I spent 15 years working on transportation issues, looking at different alternatives, working with different leadership, working with previous administrations in the state. And
you voted against the bill?
It was very painful. It was incredibly painful because it's the same thing as when I voted against the DPS. Those kids need us, but if you vote for something that is totally broken, we are going to have such a problem. Whoever gets the next term, there's going to be such problems in our state because we are already extremely constrained financially, and by taking more money out of our revenues, we're just causing more and more problems for locals. So a lot of local governments have been having to raise their taxes. So they've been doing millages on public safety or special education for our kids. A lot of that is because the state has not been investing as they used to in schools and communities. So I'm trying to change that by running for office, and it's definitely a winnable seat, and I hope to be